sitting here with legend Jim Szymanski. Jim, tell us a little bit about how you got your start in broadcasting.
Well, it all began back in the last millennium, actually. That would be in the 1900s.
Many years ago.
Many years ago. They actually did have radio back in the 70s. I began a radio career in 1975, actually. And you have to understand that in the 70s, that was the very beginning of the FM radio band. Okay. So the opportunity I had was kind of unique in that I tried out for work on stations on the FM band. It was kind of easy to get in the FM because since it was so new, very few people had FM. So they were willing to hire people who had very little experience because they knew they didn't have a big audience at all at that time. They were just developing. So the reason I was able to luck out, right place, right time, as they always say, I did start off here in the Cleveland market. And the reason, Brandon, that I was able to start off in Cleveland is because it was on the FM, and nobody had FMs yet. I would tell my family and friends, I have a radio show, and they'd say, where can we hear it? Well, it's on the FM. Oh, where do you get an FM? Yeah. So all the automobiles still had AM radios in there. Yeah. All the kids from the 60s still had their little transistor radios. Those were AM radios. Oh, yeah. So it was very But the nice thing was that it was like me getting my first job at a small market somewhere. Okay. The exact same thing. So I was able to practice my skills, make my mistakes without being fired right away because they knew, hey, nobody's listening to this guy anyway, Yeah. So I was able to develop my character, my on-air personality and so forth over the first few years without that kind of worry. Of course, eventually I was able to get better and better so that by the time more people were starting to listen to FM, I was at the place where I should be that way too.
Sounds more professional.
Exactly, yeah. So that's basically, I started here in Cleveland, but in '75 on the FM, which is kind of the beginning there. And the station I started with, by the way, was called WKSW in Cleveland. Okay. It was on the dial. You'd find it at 100 on the FM dial. Well, that was 1975. By 1980, radios were a little bit more sophisticated, and they were starting to get the points in there, 0.5, 0.2, and so forth. And so by 1980, 5 years later, they were able to, actually, they switched that format. The format I started off was called Beautiful Music, which is elevator music. It's that kind of stuff, okay? And so, hey, it's a job, though. You take, what you learn in broadcasting is whatever it is, you take it. No matter if you don't care for it or not, you take it because that's a job in broadcasting. Absolutely. So I took it, and for the first 5 years it was that easy listening kind of instrumental music like in elevators. And then in 1980, what they did was switch the format to country music here in Cleveland. It was on the FM. The only station in town at that time was WHK on the AM playing country music, but we had being on the FM, it was a better sound. It was an FM stereo sound, yeah. So the sound quality was a lot better. So people who liked country music eventually start finding out about it. They start buying the FM radios or FM converters and start listening. And eventually, what we did was we changed after we became a country station, WKSW became KS100, and then in 1984, 4 years later, we decided it would still stay country, but the FCC in 1984 made a ruling that if a company owned two stations in the same broadcast market, and we were owned by Nationwide Communications, part of the Nationwide Insurance Company. We were owned by Nationwide Communications, and they said in 1984, if Nationwide or any company owns two stations, you can use the same call letters on both your stations in the same market. Right. So they owned not only our WKSW on the FM, but Nationwide also owned the mighty 1220 WGAR AM with John Lanigan, Fig Newton, the real Bob Janes, and so forth. That was a powerhouse station for them. They said, you know what, since we can use the same call letters, we have our 1220 AM WGAR with Lanigan. Let's also make our FM WGAR also, and because people have more sophisticated radios, instead of 100 on the FM, it's actually a little bit in front of that, 99.5, so it became in 1984 WGAR 99.5 FM. It was already playing country music for 4 years, but that's when it became GAR FM.
Are they still able to do that, to use the same call letters?
Yeah, stations can use the same call letters.
I know in Youngstown, where I'm from, there's a TV station called WKBN.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an AM radio station called WKBN. So I wasn't sure how that worked.
Same ownership.
Okay, there's
Yeah, if you have an AM and FM, you have a TV and an FM or whatever.
Okay.
If you own more than one in the same market, you can use the same letters because you own them both.
Yeah.
And that was a change made in 1984, and so that's what I did. So I was there at the birth of WGAR FM in
Now,
Cleveland.
how did you make the transition from radio to television?
Okay, well, it wasn't a switch from to. It was a simultaneous.
Okay.
It was on the radio and TV at the same time. What happened, I just became acquainted with Chuck Szymanski, who happened to be producing the Big Chuck and Little John show, and he saw something I did in another program, and he said, would you be interested in coming and working with us on our show a little bit? So I did, and this was 1978. And so I came there. I started doing their audience warm-ups for them because they had, they'd always have like a Cub Scouts or somebody in the audience, but the kid just kind of sat there and twiddled their thumbs, and they, probably the Cub master says, "Now you behave, don't make noise," or And I was there, and I just got them to start laughing and clapping and, different breaks and so forth. And Chuck liked that, and his partner at the time was Houlihan, the original partner, Houlihan, Big Chuck, and they liked that I was able to work with the audience. And I was able to do that because I was on the radio. I was able to work with people. And so they invited me to come on board if I'd like to come for the taping of each show and work with the audience. So they eventually called me their poor man's Ed McMahon, who was Johnny Carson's sidekick. And so I became their poor man's Ed McMahon doing the audience warm-ups. And since I was there so often, they start using me in skits also because they would need a different character or whatever for a skit they were doing. Got to the point where I had so many skits under my belt, they were able to start doing an annual Jim Szymanski night on the Big Chuck and Little John show where I was able to co-host the show. And I was able to, they just showed all of the skits that I was in for that particular show once a year. I even brought a little visual that you can take a look. This is actually a montage of pictures. Can they see that there? I don't know, is that in? Okay. This way? The other left. Oh, here we go. Okay, this is actually a montage of photos of some of the skits that I was in. This montage they gave me, and all those who did skits for the show, they gave them all to us. And once a year at our Goulardi Fest, which is right around Halloween time, we have these so that when the folks come to Goulardi Fest, if they want to get our autograph, we have something to sign for them. And it has just some of the different skits I did for the show. There's Cuyahoga Jones skits here. This is a spoof on a commercial, Mrs. Kelka's Pie Crust. Here's a spoof as a television news anchor doing a story about the Goodyear blimp crash and such. So these are kind of some of the things I did there on that show.
For people who may not know who Goulardi is, could you explain a little bit about the history of Goulardi a little bit?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, that all started in 1963. Back then in the 60s, a TV station would buy a movie package from movie distributors. Yeah. They would buy a package, and they'd probably get maybe 40 movies. That's a cluster of 40 movies in that package, okay? And they were allowed to maybe show each one twice during that 6-month period or whatever. Well, some of those obviously were the blockbusters that they could really get some big money at, prime time movies and such. Maybe their Saturday night block or whatever, and they can get some good sales. Salespeople could sell those movies very good. They were the big blockbusters. Yeah. But along with those came the B movies, which they could maybe put on here or there as fill and so forth. And then there came the C movies. Now the C movies, yeah, they were, but they were like the old sci-fi and the Attack of the Crab Monsters and the Women of Venus, and they're really the C grade movies. What do you do with those? How do you package those for your audience anywhere, Well, they came up with the idea, hey, let's have one of our staff announcers just host a Friday night show after the news, late night, 11:30, when nobody's going to be watching anyway, and we'll just have them show those movies and kind of intersperse in between with funny stuff and all that stuff. So one of their announcers on duty was a fellow named Ernie Anderson at WJW. And he was an announcer, and he was doing not only was he a staff announcer for Fox 8, but he also did a lot of freelance commercial work too, not only in Cleveland, but in other areas around Northeast Ohio. He was very good at announcing. And when they approached him about this and hosting a movie thing, that Elvira was popular at that time on the West Coast. They said maybe something like Elvira does in California there, like you want to do a horror kind of thing or whatever. And he said, listen, he says, I'll host the show because he was under contract. So they figured let's use him for something. Yeah. So. He said, I'll host a show at night and show the schlocky movies. But he said, for one thing, I can't be myself because I have a lot of good clients who pay me big money to do voiceover work on their commercials and such. So I got to take on a persona. And they said, that's fine. You can do an Elvira or whatever, anything like that, Dracula, whatever. So he came up with this. It was the 60s, 63, so it was the hippie movement and so forth. So he kind of put on like a little, they call it a fright wig, just kind of a floppy kind of a wig and a little goatee and a mustache, like a beatnik kind of thing, character, and did those kind of things, and put on a lab coat, like a white lab coat, and just put a lot of buttons all over it, a lot of political buttons and things. And that was but in other words, he didn't look like himself because he didn't want the people who were his clients who he did commercial work for to know what it's all about, or that it was him. And so he started that, and he didn't want to be a ghoulish. I don't want to be a ghoul, but he came up with the idea of putting a little. Some people say it was like an Italian sound to it, and he put the arty at the end of ghoul, so he became Ghoulardi. Well, the thing is, they don't. That was just a lark. They had no idea if this would take off or not. But his character, his kind of hippie character, and the catchphrases he uses, hey, cool it with the boom booms, because kids would send in firecrackers and he'd light those on set and everything. And he'd cool it with the boom booms and, hey, scratch glass, and, hey, you finks, which is kniff back. He actually used kniff, which was fink backwards, and those kind of things. So he developed a lot of catchphrases. And all of a sudden, it started catching on with the teens and young adults and so forth. And before you know it, he starts getting more and more people watching, so much so that this has been documented. In Cleveland, he had such a high rating after about the first year of developing an audience that within about the first year of being on the air, he literally was the only locally produced TV show on Friday nights in the entire country that had higher ratings than The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He outrated The Tonight Show on Friday nights in Cleveland, the only place in the country that had higher ratings than Carson on Friday nights. And here's the interesting thing. The people who remember Ghoulardi, who started all this Friday night movie hosting, those who remember him think he must have been on for 10, 15 years or something because he was such a phenomenon. He was so popular, even the Cleveland police said the crime rate in Cleveland went down on Friday nights because he was on. And they waited until after his show was over before they went out and burglarized houses, So even the crime rate went down because even the crooks wanted to stay home and watch him. Anyway, so that was the beginning of it, but he was only here 3.5 years. After, in 1966, his good buddy and friend that he worked with, Tim Conway, who already went to California, Tim Conway said, hey, come over. Tim Conway had just finished doing the McHale's Navy program, and he was now on the Carol Burnett show. Yeah. And he says, hey, come to California. I can get you as an announcer for Carol Burnett right away because she's looking for an announcer for the show, and then you can do some commercial work here and such. So he left, and Houlihan and Big Chuck took over, and the rest is history. That's the short answer.
And most people who've heard the name probably recognize it from Drew Carey's show. Drew Carey used to wear the Ghoulardi shirt.
Yeah, he did. Drew Carey grew up on the west side there, and he was a big fan of Big Chuck and Little Houlihan, Houlihan and Big Chuck, Ghoulardi. Yeah. He was a big fan of theirs. So Chuck and John he used to watch him all the time. So Chuck and John sent him some merchandise stuff, and he got the T-shirt and he wore it, or sweatshirt, whatever it was. He wore that on his show, the Drew Carey show. It's true.
Yeah. And you were inducted into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame in 2008, right?
It was in 1995.
Oh, it was 95. Okay.
Yeah, 1995. Yeah. So,
what was your reaction when you found out that you were being inducted?
Well,
I mean, that's got to be a big thing. That's a national recognition.
well, actually, it's the Ohio
Oh, it's
Broadcasters.
the Ohio
Yeah,
okay.
the Ohio Broadcasters Hall of Fame, yeah. Because I really didn't have national exposure
Okay.
as such. Okay, but I mean, that's
That's a
for
big
Ohio,
honor,
yeah,
right?
for Ohio. Maria, well, I was obviously very, very honored and pleased too. And I think that probably the reason was because when I was at GAR, that's mainly the reason. I was the public service director there. And being the public service director, since I had a nighttime show, I was available during the daytime to go to public service functions, whether it was something at the art museum or what have you, you know. And so I represented the radio station a lot in the community because of that. And I did the Channel 25 auction they do every springtime, you know, representing our station and such, those kind of things. So I was all over the place, really. And I used to get kidded by a lot of the other broadcasters. Oh, there's Szymanski again. He's doing that. He's doing. And because I was involved in so many community activities over the years, what happened was somebody who was in the board of the Broadcasters Hall of Fame said, "Hey, how about it was because of my public service work. That's the reason I got in there." So, and that was 1995. As a matter of the interesting thing too, the night I was inducted in October of 1995, it was the exact same night that in Nashville, WGAR was being recognized by the CMA, Country Music Association, as the major market radio station of the year, because they do their awards in October, and it was the exact same night. It was a Saturday night. No, it was. Yeah, I think it was a Saturday night. The exact same night that when I was in Cleveland being inducted here, we had representatives from our station in Nashville receiving the award. First time a radio station north of the Mason-Dixon line got the Major Market Radio Station of the Year award for country music. And they did that in 1995. And then they weren't eligible in 96 according to rules, but in 97 they reapplied again and you do all kind of things to apply for it. And they won again a second time in 1997. So I was there both years when GAR got the Major Market Station of the Year from the CMA. Yeah.
And so you're retired now, right?
From broadcast radio, yeah.
And what have you been doing since you've retired?
Well, I left broadcast radio in I left in 1998 GAR to come here to the Ohio Center for Broadcasting. So I've been here. So 98 makes it about 15 years that I've been here now at OCB, just kind of to help those coming along now get involved in what I was doing. I had a good run. I enjoyed what I did. But my time is finished, and so now it's time for others to step into place. And any way I can help, I'm willing to help.
What kind of words of encouragement could you offer for somebody trying to get into that field?
Okay, yeah. If you're trying to get into broadcasting, a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, you have to have dedication. I see some people coming here, when they walk into these doors, all they know about are radio disc jockeys and TV news people. Yeah. That's the only idea they have about broadcasting, and so that's all they're thinking about. There are probably 50, 60 different job functions you can get in this business that are all just as rewarding, just as fun in the business as those two of being a radio DJ or a news reporter on television. So the point is, you have to come in here with an open mind, knowing that there's a lot of job functions, and then also you have to be willing to work for what you want. And that's true with any kind of job description, not just broadcasting. Yeah. Any kind of a job you want to get involved with, whether you want to get into banking, you want to get into medicine or law or whatever it is, you've got to be, first of all, dedicated, willing to do just about anything, knowing you're going to start at the bottom and work your way up, okay? And a lot of people are maybe feel insulted or you're inferior. What do you mean start at the bottom? Yeah, well, yeah, you got to start at the bottom. Practice, practice, practice. I can observe some people who I feel sorry for them, but they'll do something, a project of some kind one time, and then they don't want to do it anymore. They say, "Oh, I did that once." You've got to practice. Think of pro sports people or professional actors on television or movies or whatever. They practice. Pro football, pro basketball, they're always practicing. You practice, practice, practice. You don't say, "Oh, I tried foul shots once. I know what it's about."
I used to play guitar 15 hours a day.
Yeah, a musical instrument, exactly.
Yeah.
You've got to practice. You've got to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Discipline yourself to keep doing it. That's the advice I got to give, because if you walk in here anywhere with the attitude that the world owes me a living and I don't have to practice, it's just I exist, therefore I should have this job, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So that's what I would say. Just practice, be disciplined, and learn all you can, do everything you can, learn as many. The more job functions you learn, the more useful of an employee you'll be to someday when you apply for work. They might be hiring you to do this particular job, but in the interview, if they know you also know how to do that, you can do that. It's a TV disc jockey, it's a radio disc jockey job, but they know you can run camera, and they have a sister station on the other side of the building, and if the camera guy gets sick, they can call you to go and fill in for. I mean, all of a sudden, you're making yourself a much more valuable employee.
Is that why you would recommend the Ohio Center for Broadcasting? Because they train you on everything?
Yeah, this is an all-inclusive. When you enroll here, you don't say, oh, I'm going to specialize in this. No, this program covers everything during the 11 months that you're here.
Yeah.
You have exposure to all aspects of the business, not only on camera and on microphone, but behind that camera, editing, writing copy, writing news copy, commercial copy, the promotions and marketing. We have broadcast sales. I mean, it's all inclusive in there. Just absorb. A person who absorbs as much as they can and becomes knowledgeable about everything. You may not be real proficient in every single thing, but you're knowledgeable and you've experienced it and you know what it's like, then you offer a lot more on the table when it's time to get a job.
You may find something that you like more than what you thought you were coming to do.
Very often, because you enter a place like this, you don't even know all the job functions. I've had people who wound up, they came in to be a disc jockey on the radio, and then they wound up in promotions and marketing because they found that, man, this is fun stuff. I mean, you're setting up displays on all the remotes and everything, and then you have all these things to pass out to listeners, or people get involved in editing, video editing, and all of a sudden, this is like playing computer games at home. I mean, it's you're moving things around and cutting, and hey, let's try this, and let's try that, and put this sound effect on. I mean, it's fun stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming by and taking time out of your busy day. I know you're a very busy guy.
Well, you're quite welcome. It's my pleasure to do that. Sure thing.
Nice having a legend here.
Oh, well, a legend in my own mind.